Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she didn't even get a chance to defend herself. And yet, when officers stepped into that quiet suburban home in Kilbarrack, Dublin at 1:17 a.m. on June 15, 2023, the scene didn't match the call that came in minutes earlier. There was no chaos, no sign of a break-in, no overturned furniture. The front door was cracked open, the hallway lights still glowing. Upstairs, two children were asleep, unharmed, undisturbed. And in the kitchen, a body, face down. Blood congealed on ceramic tile. A single kitchen knife lay next to her open hand. The woman was later confirmed as 43-year-old Anna Mooney. But what chilled detectives wasn't the body, it was the phone on the counter, still recording. The initial 911 call was logged at 1:09 a.m., a male voice, low tone, no distress. "I think I killed her." That's all he said. The dispatcher asked for details. There was no immediate response, only the sounds of shallow breathing. When officers arrived, he was seated in the front room, waiting. No signs of a struggle, no attempt to flee, no blood on the exterior door handles. The scene, at first glance, had all the markers of a domestic homicide where the suspect voluntarily confessed. But it didn't add up, at least not the way they were expecting. Detective Sergeant Laura Quinn was the first on scene. With over 17 years on the Dublin force, she'd walked into dozens of crime scenes. But she later told internal investigators this one felt structured. Her words, "It looked like it was meant to be found that way. Clean, controlled, almost curated." The victim had 5 visible wounds, 2 to the chest, 1 fatal. A post-mortem would later confirm that 1 strike pierced the pericardium and diaphragm. There were no defensive wounds on the forearms, no broken fingernails. No signs she ever fought back. While the medical team worked the scene, Detective Quinn's attention turned to the smartphone. It was propped awkwardly against a salt shaker, still unlocked, camera app running. The video timer ticked past 87 minutes. She paused the footage. The last 30 seconds showed the kitchen empty, silent. But moments before, audio, not screaming, not arguing, something worse, silence interrupted by intention. Detectives collected the device immediately. It was booked into digital evidence by 3:26 a.m., and forensic techs from the Garda National Cybercrime Bureau were called in that morning. What they would find in that footage would reframe the case, not as a crime of passion, but as something deliberate. Anna Mooney, born Anna Shuplikova, was a Ukrainian national who had lived in Ireland since 2005. Mother of 2, no known enemies, no financial stress, no reported history of domestic violence on file. At 43, she was described by co-workers as reserved but dependable. She worked part-time at a beauty salon just 2 miles from her home. Her boss, interviewed 2 days after the homicide, said she'd seemed more withdrawn lately and had asked about shorter shifts, citing stress at home. She wasn't afraid, the woman said. She was tired. The house at Kilbarrack Road had been home to Anna, her husband, and their 2 children for nearly a decade. Neighbors said the family mostly kept to themselves. No noise complaints, no police visits, no red flags. But when officers canvassed the block, one neighbor, who asked not to be identified, mentioned something odd. He was always the one dropping the kids off, always the one picking her up, always had her phone if she left it behind, just always there. No one had heard any shouting the night of the murder, no alarms, no dog barking. The only reason the police arrived was the 911 call. As daylight broke over Dublin, the incident was logged formally as a domestic fatality, but the case was flagged for elevated review due to incongruous forensic indicators, the phrasing used in the internal summary. In other words, it was too clean, too quiet, too intentional. Detectives froze the scene. Ordered a secondary forensic sweep with luminol. They didn't find signs of attempted cleanup, but they did find something else, a second phone. It belonged to the victim, and it was locked. By midday, both phones were submitted for digital extraction under emergency warrant. While the autopsy report was being compiled, cyber forensic specialists initiated a Celebrite analysis on Anna's device. At this point, all they knew was the house had no sign of forced entry. The husband had confessed, the body showed no defensive trauma, and the victim's own phone might hold the reason why. But they also knew something else. The call came in after the fatal blow. Not during, not in panic, but after. When asked later during internal proceedings if anything about that first night stood out, Detective Quinn didn't hesitate. The phone wasn't just still recording, she said. It was placed deliberately, it was angled, it was watching, and it didn't stop. You don't do that unless you want someone to find it. That's not impulse, that's staging. She paused. We weren't just looking at a murder. We were walking into a message. When a crime scene is this controlled, the victim's life becomes the next search warrant. That's where the truth usually hides, not in the act, but in the buildup. Anna Shuplikova-Mooney was born in Ukraine in 1980. She moved to Ireland in 2005 after marrying an Irish citizen she met through a mutual connection abroad. At the time, she was 25. The relationship began long distance. Her move was swift, documented by immigration files and verified marriage registration in County Dublin. By 2007, she had 2 children, both born at Beaumont Hospital. She wasn't wealthy, she didn't have a criminal record, she had never filed a domestic complaint. There were no custody battles, no reported threats, no restraining orders. On paper, Anna led an unremarkable life, but the forensics on paper never tell the full story. In the weeks leading up to June 15th, Anna's behavior began to shift. Digital timestamps showed that she had changed her Apple ID password on May 28th. A few days later, she installed a Privacy Vault app on her phone, an encrypted folder used to hide sensitive photos, messages, or personal notes. It was a version rarely seen in domestic cases unless the victim feared someone close to them was monitoring their device. The app itself wasn't illegal, but the presence of one on a phone that had never installed anything outside the App Store for over a year raised the first procedural question. Why now? Detectives pulled her device usage records. From May 28th to June 13th, Anna's screen time doubled. She spent long hours in Safari. Her messages shifted to WhatsApp and Signal. For the first time in years, she changed her lock screen PIN. What stood out wasn't that she used her phone more. It was how deliberately she had begun to create separation from someone. Inside the Photo Vault app, forensic techs recovered unsent messages written to an unknown recipient. I don't want to fight. I just want peace. He knows I've changed the passcode. He watches what I click. Can you help me find a place with the kids? These drafts were never sent, but they were written, documented by metadata and creation time. June 11th, 4 days before she died. Anna's employer confirmed she had recently asked to reduce her hours. No formal HR complaint was filed, but a colleague stated during interview, she didn't talk much, but you could see she was drained. Her shoulders were always tense. One day she stayed in the back room for over an hour, just staring at her phone. There was no clear evidence of physical abuse, but digital patterns showed something closer to behavioral entrapment, routine surveillance, digital interference, and psychological containment. Anna had also attempted to reset a recovery email associated with a joint financial account. The request was blocked. The email was linked to her husband's device. Investigators reconstructed the week prior to the murder. On June 8th, Anna visited a property rental site based in Dublin. She contacted 2 listings but never followed through. On June 10th, she checked opening hours for the family law courts in Dublin. June 12th, she researched divorce rights for non-citizens in Ireland. Those searches weren't criminal, but they outlined something that, in domestic homicide cases, becomes a red flag: intent to exit. Leaving a relationship, especially one with coercive control, is statistically the most dangerous window for a woman. That window, for Anna, closed violently. Detective Quinn reviewed Anna's search history with caution. At face value, it looked like a woman planning her departure, but one entry stood out. It wasn't a search. It was a query typed, but never submitted. How do you prove someone is watching your phone? The phrasing was specific, not spying, not reading texts. Watching. That word, according to the digital forensics team, indicated real-time access. Mirroring software. Remote screen viewers. The kind of tools used in digital abuse cases, rarely logged, but devastating when confirmed. A forensic sweep of Anna's device did not find spyware installed, but there was a pattern of data syncing to a shared cloud account. And on that account, investigators found deleted screenshots. Several showed banking apps, message threads, and Anna's call logs. They were all saved from another device. Someone was watching. What does that mean in a legal context? Not much, until it escalates. And it did. On June 13th, 2 days before her death, Anna backed up her entire phone to an encrypted drive. It was an act of digital insurance, but she never got to use it. The drive was found still in the box, untouched, still in the linen closet. Neighbors were questioned. None reported hearing loud arguments. None saw visible bruising. But one neighbor, a retired school teacher, shared an observation. She stopped looking people in the eye. And that's the thing, she used to smile at everyone. But in the last few months, it was like she was folding into herself. Domestic coercion doesn't always leave marks. It leaves patterns. Patterns visible to those who know where to look. Reduced social contact, changes in tech habits, relocation efforts that stall, and a digital trail of small warnings. Anna was trying to create distance, quietly, strategically, but she didn't move fast enough. The day before she died, she texted a friend, "Can we meet next week? There's something I need to talk about." The message was seen but never replied to in time, and by the time that friend responded, Anna's phone was in evidence lockup. This chapter isn't about tragedy, it's about prevention. Because in this case, the warning signs weren't just visible, they were time-stamped, backed up, and left behind for someone to read. That someone turned out to be investigators, but they were days too late. When officers entered the Mooney residence on Kilbarrack Road in the early hours of June 15, 2023, they knew one fact: someone had died. What they didn't expect was that the man waiting for them, calm, seated, hands visible, was the husband of the victim. Stephen Mooney, age 52, identified himself as the person who had called 911 minutes earlier. The victim was his wife of 18 years, Anna Shuplikova Mooney. The couple shared 2 children, both of whom were asleep upstairs, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded below. Stephen didn't resist. He didn't run. When asked by first responders what had happened, he gave a short, measured answer. "We had an argument. I think I killed her." The statement was logged, but investigators knew better than to treat it as a full confession. Phrasing like "I think" was often the first indicator that a defense team might lean toward mental distress or impaired recollection. What mattered more was what the evidence would show, and that evidence had already started to speak. In the kitchen, near Anna's body, a smartphone had been found propped upright on the counter. The camera was still running when officers arrived. The video file was time-stamped and confirmed to be 90 minutes long. It had been recording before, during, and after the killing. No camera shake, no accidental angle. The positioning was deliberate, fixed, waiting. At Garda headquarters, the digital forensics team extracted the video within the first 12 hours. It became the center of the investigation. In the footage, Anna is seen entering the kitchen alone. She moves casually, opens the fridge, pours something into a glass. Her posture is relaxed, no sign of immediate threat. A few minutes later, Stephen enters the frame partially. Only his voice is clearly captured. He asks for her phone passcode. She hesitates. The tone is low but tense. "Why are you hiding things from me?" he asks. Anna doesn't raise her voice. There's a pause. Then another request for her phone. When she refuses again, the sound of a drawer sliding open is captured. A sharp object, later matched to the kitchen's own cutlery set, is withdrawn. At 1:11:22 in the recording, the first impact is heard. A strike, then another. 5 total sounds, consistent with stab wounds verified by acoustic analysis. The breathing shifts. Movement stops. There is no scream, no panic, no call for help. The man believed to be Stephen Mooney doesn't immediately call 911. Instead, there's silence for almost 2 full minutes. Only at 1:14 a.m. does the call begin. Forensic examiners reviewed the physical evidence alongside the video. The knife used matched others in the household, confirming it came from the same drawer. No defensive wounds were found on Anna. She had not attempted to fight back. A fingerprint lifted from the upper grip of the knife belonged to Stephen Mooney. DNA under Anna's fingernails matched only her own. There were no signs of a struggle elsewhere in the home. The scene was static, too static. Officers began examining Stephen's behavior in the hours before the incident. Location data showed no unusual movement. He'd worked from home. Calls to clients were logged through his business phone, and no distress was reported by anyone who spoke with him that day. But his personal device told a different story. Browser history from 11:20 p.m. to 12:33 a.m., just hours before the murder, showed a trail of search queries. How to unlock iPhone without code. How to record secretly on phone. Can screen recordings be traced? These weren't idle searches. They directly aligned with the way the crime scene had been staged. The smartphone that captured the video belonged to Stephen Mooney. It had been placed, app open, and facing the kitchen. The data showed that recording began at 12:39 a.m., over 30 minutes before the fatal assault, meaning the camera was active long before any alleged loss of control. This timeline voided any assumption of a spontaneous act. When detectives questioned Stephen formally, he remained consistent with his original statement. He claimed he snapped after weeks of tension in the marriage. When asked about the recording, he said he didn't know it was running, but data from the device's usage contradicted that claim. The app used to record video had been opened manually. It wasn't set to auto-record. The phone had been unlocked with Stephen's fingerprint at 12:38 a.m., just 1 minute before recording began. Forensic review confirmed no one else had accessed the device. Stephen Mooney had placed the phone, started recording, and waited. The question became, what did he intend to do with the footage? Detectives speculated several possibilities. 1. Blackmail, in case Anna tried to leave and take the children. 2. An attempt to frame her. 3. Control. Pure documentation of what he considered his final say. The forensic team didn't deal in motive. They dealt in evidence. And the evidence was growing stronger by the hour. Network logs from the home router revealed another digital marker. A MacBook registered to Stephen's real estate business had connected to the same iCloud account Anna's phone used. This occurred at 12:47 a.m., roughly 8 minutes after the recording began. This was critical. It proved Stephen was logged into Anna's cloud environment just before her death, the same environment that stored her messages, call history, and location data. And from that connection, deleted files were found. Screenshots of Anna's WhatsApp conversations, her browsing history, even her draft messages in encrypted folders. He had access to her digital life, and he used it. As forensic specialists pieced together the data, the crime shifted in legal classification. This was no longer viewed as domestic violence or heat-of-the-moment tragedy. The data supported staging, the behavior pointed to control, and the preparation suggested premeditation. Internal reports by the Garda Tech Unit stated, video, browser activity, and network access all indicate a timeline inconsistent with spontaneous or reactive behavior. The act appears structured, recorded, and intentional. When presented with these findings, Stephen Mooney ceased cooperating with Gardaí and invoked counsel. No further interviews were granted, but by then the digital trail had already spoken. Every modern crime leaves behind two scenes, the physical and the digital. And in this case, the digital trail wasn't just informative, it was invasive. When Gardaí began analyzing the cloud data connected to Anna Shuplakova Mooney's phone, they weren't expecting to find a second user. But less than 24 hours after the murder, cyber forensics confirmed that Anna's iCloud account had been accessed from another device, a MacBook Pro tied to her husband, Stephen Mooney. The access logs told a story in binary. 12:47 a.m. On June 15th, the same morning Anna died, the laptop initiated a session into her account from within the same IP block as the family home. The session lasted 23 minutes. The browser history showed that during that window, multiple data categories were opened: messages, photo storage, and location history. This wasn't guesswork. It was confirmed access, authenticated via two-factor verification using a method that only someone already in possession of her device, or with full control of household devices, could perform. That detail mattered. In a physical context, nothing in the house had been broken. There were no signs of forced entry. In the digital space, the same was true, except the entry was authorized. Stephen didn't hack his wife's account. He already had her passwords. Investigators discovered that Anna's iCloud had been linked to a shared family account for nearly 8 years. During that time, access had been mostly benign: calendar syncs, family photo albums, shared notes. But in the 6 weeks prior to her death, activity spiked. A technical report noted 37 downloads from Anna's iCloud during that period. Of those, 19 were image files. Several included screenshots Anna had taken, some of message threads, some of banking records, and at least one of a WhatsApp conversation in which she had typed, but never sent, the words, "I'm leaving. I just need to figure out when." The screenshot had been deleted from her device, but not from the shared cloud. This was the layer that changed how detectives viewed motive. Stephen didn't just suspect she wanted to leave. He knew. Detective Laura Quinn later described the case's turning point like this. There's a difference between reacting to betrayal and preparing for someone to leave. One is emotional, the other is methodical. The timeline grew clearer. Anna had backed up her phone manually to an external device on June 13th. That backup included all her messages, voice notes, and passwords. She never got the chance to move it off-site. The drive was found 2 days later, untouched, still in the original packaging. But her intent was unmistakable. She had begun taking digital steps toward independence. Meanwhile, Stephen was using those same tools to monitor her, not with malware, not with tracking devices, but with access she had granted years earlier, never suspecting it would one day be used against her. He had read her unsent messages, viewed her app download logs, tracked her movements via Find My iPhone. There was even a record showing that on June 10th, he used the location sharing feature to confirm that Anna had visited a rental property, alone. That visit had not been disclosed to friends or family. She had told no one, but her phone had logged it, and Stephen had seen it. In forensic terms, the data painted an undeniable profile: surveillance without confrontation, information gathering without open accusation. There were no emails demanding answers, no messages sent, just silent access, over and over. Investigators also discovered that 2 days before Anna's death, Stephen had created a folder on his laptop named Anna Backup. Inside were 4 subfolders: messages, screenshots, PDFs, and WhatsApp notes. Each contained exported files pulled directly from her account. The last file had been created at 1:02 a.m. on June 15th, just 7 minutes before the first stab wound. The sequence was tight, too tight. Back at the station, digital forensics reconstructed the cross-device access. They confirmed the following. The MacBook was connected via Ethernet, not Wi-Fi, suggesting a deliberate choice to ensure stability during download. The video on Stephen's phone had been started at 12:39 a.m., consistent with the laptop access time. The iCloud access ended at 1:10 a.m., moments before Anna was fatally injured at 1:11:22 a.m. based on audio analysis. In short, the data collection and the act itself weren't separate events. They were phases of the same operation. There's no crime called emotional preloading, but if there were, this would qualify. He didn't just kill her. He studied her life, archived it, and made sure he understood what she was planning to do next, before taking control of the outcome. In interviews, friends recalled that Anna had grown more private in the final month. She no longer left her phone unattended. She avoided syncing devices at home. When asked why, she gave vague answers. Just being careful, or it's nothing serious. But behind those words was a pattern of deliberate caution. She knew someone was watching. What she didn't know was how closely, or how thoroughly. It's often said that domestic violence escalates when the victim tries to leave. This case demonstrated something even more calculated. The violence didn't escalate when she tried to leave. It escalated when he believed she was going to succeed. The days following Anna Mooney's death were marked by a type of quiet unrest, subdued but absolute. Behind the sealed doors of the crime scene at Beachfield Avenue, forensic units operated on a 48-hour rotation, combing every surface for residuals that could link Stephen Mooney directly to the fatal act. Despite his formal confession, the Gardaí knew better than to rely solely on an admission. Words could be recanted, evidence could not. Detectives began by revisiting the internal layout of the house. The kitchen, where Anna's body had been found, showed clear signs of disruption. The overturned chair, a wine glass shattered under the table, a pool of dried blood beneath the lower cabinetry. These weren't just elements of chaos. They were indicators of an abrupt, sustained assault. From the first swing of the knife, Anna had tried to retreat, but the angles of the blood spatter suggested she had been blocked. There was no evidence of her making it out of the kitchen alive. On the countertop, investigators recovered a small paring knife, still damp from being rinsed but showing faint traces of blood in the grooves of the handle. It wasn't the murder weapon. That blade, serrated 8 inches long, was found in the outdoor waste bin, partially wrapped in a kitchen towel. A forensic pathologist later confirmed the serrations matched the jagged injuries on Anna's chest. In parallel, the digital forensics team turned to Stephen's electronic footprint. His phone log showed a series of deleted text messages, all sent between 6 o'clock and 6:40 p.m. on the day of the murder. Through data recovery software, investigators were able to retrieve the contents. One message read simply, "She keeps pushing. I can't take much more of this." That text was sent at 6:18 p.m. Anna was pronounced dead at approximately 6:32 p.m. In his second interview with detectives, Stephen began to walk back his confession. He claimed that he had been provoked, that Anna had come at him, and that he lost control. But the Ring doorbell camera, recovered from the front entrance, refuted that claim. The footage, time-stamped and secured by tech experts, captured Anna arriving home at 5:47 p.m., entering with a bag of groceries. No sign of aggression, no visible argument. What followed inside, however, was not visible on the footage, but it didn't have to be. Anna's personal diary, retrieved from the bedroom closet, provided psychological context. In entries dated just days before her death, she detailed multiple confrontations with Stephen, describing him as unpredictable, manipulative, and borderline unhinged. The most chilling entry was dated 4 days prior. "If anything ever happens to me, please don't believe it was an accident." To further secure motive, detectives obtained Stephen's financial statements. Months prior, he had taken out a substantial personal loan under both their names without Anna's knowledge. In the days before the murder, she had discovered the debt and confronted him. The financial motive, combined with the history of emotional volatility, helped prosecutors frame the case for intentional homicide, not an act of passion. Meanwhile, Anna's autopsy report became central to dismantling Stephen's shifting narrative. Conducted by Dr. Fiona Murphy of the Dublin Coroner's Office, the report concluded, cause of death, exsanguination due to multiple stab wounds to the upper thorax. Number of stab wounds, 11. Defensive wounds present on both forearms. Toxicology, no sedatives or intoxicants found in Anna's system. The presence of defensive wounds shattered any implication of mutual aggression. Anna had fought back. She had been fully conscious. She had wanted to live. In a final effort to redirect suspicion, Stephen suggested that Anna had previously expressed suicidal thoughts. But this too collapsed under scrutiny. A psychological review of Anna's records showed no history of mental illness, and her close friends confirmed she was actively planning to file for separation. The prosecution now had a narrative backed by physical evidence, digital traces, a motive, and an attempt to mislead law enforcement. Stephen Mooney's initial confession, though later diluted, had already been recorded and legally admissible under Irish law due to its voluntary nature and the presence of counsel. By the end of June 2023, the prosecution had built an airtight case. A pretrial hearing was scheduled for August. The timeline of Anna Mooney's final hours was no longer theoretical. It was mapped in detail, frame by frame, thanks to the motion-triggered CCTV system inside the couple's Dublin home. Installed for home security, the same system would seal Stephen Mooney's fate. On the morning of April 4, 2023, Gardaí returned to the Mooney residence in Crumlin with a digital forensics team and a search warrant approved based on inconsistencies in Stephen's earlier interviews. What they retrieved from the internal security system was more than surveillance. It was evidence. The footage, time-stamped just past 7:30 a.m., showed Anna entering the kitchen. She appeared calm, holding a cup. Stephen followed minutes later. There was no audio, but body language filled the gaps. Tension, confrontation, sudden movement. Stephen reached into a drawer. Anna stepped back. Then, the unmistakable motion of a knife being raised and driven forward. The video cut off 30 seconds later, likely due to system overload or damage, intentional or incidental. The autopsy had already painted a brutal picture. 4 stab wounds to the torso, 2 of which punctured major organs. The pathologist confirmed no signs of defensive wounds, suggesting Anna had little time or chance to respond. Toxicology came back clean. No substances in her system. This wasn't a drug-induced confusion or self-inflicted harm. It was homicide. Direct, physical, personal. Yet up until that point, Stephen had maintained a partial defense. He told Gardaí that Anna had attacked him first, that he acted in panic, but the footage negated that. And then came the detail investigators didn't expect. A neighbor's Ring doorbell camera had picked up audio, muffled but clear enough. At 7:33 a.m., a man's voice screamed, "Why do you always push me?" followed by a woman's plea, "Stephen, stop, please." Then silence. That audio synced with the internal timestamp of the house footage. It shattered Stephen's claim of provocation. The prosecution now had a timeline, physical evidence, visual record, and external audio confirmation. The case no longer rested on inference, it was forensic fact. During Garda interview number 4, conducted in a controlled environment at Kevin Street Garda Station, with his solicitor present, Stephen was presented with the compiled footage, the pathologist's report, and the Ring audio. For 42 minutes, he stared ahead, no comments. Then he whispered, "I lost it. She said she was leaving me, said she was done. I thought she meant it this time." He didn't ask for leniency, he didn't ask for a break. He signed the statement. The words were simple. "I stabbed Anna. I killed my wife." The Gardaí didn't make the confession public immediately. Out of respect for Anna's family, and because the case was airtight, they prepared for trial without media spectacle. At a special sitting of the Central Criminal Court, Stephen Mooney pleaded guilty. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment under Irish law with no possibility of parole under 12 years. The judge noted the deliberate, repeated, and fatal nature of the attack, the presence of pre-installed surveillance, and the absence of remorse prior to arrest. By the time Stephen Mooney's sentence was handed down in late July 2023, the case had already left a permanent scar on Dublin's Southside community. But beyond the conviction, investigators and legal analysts turned their attention to the residual elements of the case, elements that exposed gaps, signals missed, and the silence that surrounded a growing threat. Anna Mooney had no official record of filing domestic violence complaints, no protective orders, no medical reports. Yet as Gardaí combed through her text history, a different picture emerged. Messages exchanged with her sister in March 2023 included phrases like, "He's been getting worse, moody all the time. He watches everything I do, every receipt, every phone call. I'm thinking of moving in with you for a bit." These texts, while not explicit declarations of danger, indicated a pattern of coercive control, a precursor in many domestic homicide cases. Investigators found a deleted draft email on Anna's iPad, likely composed days before the murder. It was addressed to a family solicitor, inquiring about legal separation and her rights to the shared property. That draft was last saved on April 2, 2023, 2 days before her death. Stephen Mooney, in his post-sentencing evaluation, underwent psychological risk assessment as part of the standard prison intake process. The findings, which were disclosed with court approval, indicated a narcissistic personality structure, impulse control deficits, a lack of empathy or external remorse, though cognitive acknowledgement of wrongdoing was present. These weren't excuses, but they added a layer of explanation that would later inform policy discussion within Ireland's domestic violence prevention framework. Public reaction to the case was swift. The Minister for Justice referenced Anna's death in a June 2023 parliamentary session, citing it as part of the reason for accelerating coercive control education programs across Garda training centers and community outreach. "We must act before a knife is ever drawn," the minister said. "Control is violence. Surveillance is violence. Silence around it is complicity." Anna's employer, an educational nonprofit, established the Anna Mooney Fund to support relocation costs for women attempting to leave unsafe domestic environments. The fund launched with $20,000 and was matched by government grants within 3 weeks. Stephen Mooney remains incarcerated at Portlace Prison, Ireland's high-security facility. He is not eligible for parole review until 2035. His application for appeal was withdrawn in December 2023, citing undeniable factual evidence and admission of guilt. There were no further public statements from him. The forensic report confirmed what investigators already suspected. Anna Mooney had been attacked in her own home, early morning, with no defensive wounds. Multiple stab wounds, one fatally severing an artery, ended her life swiftly. The weapon, a kitchen knife, had been poorly washed and left in the sink. Blood spatter in the living room and hallway supported a clear sequence. She was attacked suddenly, likely with little time to react. CCTV from neighboring homes captured Stephen Mooney leaving the house later that morning, calm, gloved, showing no urgency. He never called emergency services. Instead, he deleted messages from his phone and left. Inside the home, Anna's journal laid untouched, a detailed log of prior abuse and her intention to leave permanently. It became a central piece of evidence in the case. In court, the prosecution's case was direct. Digital traces, forensic evidence, and Stephen's behavior before and after the murder all pointed to premeditation. On November 27, 2023, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole under Irish law. The judge noted the calculated nature of the crime and rejected all mitigating arguments. After the sentencing, advocates reminded the public that Anna's death was not isolated. Domestic violence remains a deadly threat, often invisible until it's too late. Anna had taken steps, spoken to friends, documented her experiences, but no one imagined it would end like this. Her legacy now stands not just in legal precedent, but as a reminder. Silence in abusive homes can be fatal, and protection must come before tragedy. Sometimes, justice comes too late to save a life, but it can still speak for the one lost. Telling Anna's story reminded me just how fragile the line is between silence and tragedy. If you or someone you know is facing harm at home, don't wait. Speak, document, reach out. You deserve to be safe and believed. What do you think could truly change the way we respond to domestic violence? Have you or your community taken steps that made a difference? If this story touched your heart or made you reflect, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate with you, I'd still love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more real stories that matter, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps keep these voices heard.